Well, good afternoon, evening, morning to everyone who is attending today. So this is our November Akka.net Community Stand-Up. I'm joined here by my colleague, Gregorius Sodharmo.
Oh,
Gregorius, how are you doing today, man? How are things going?
good considering.
Yeah,
Everything's
good.
fine.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we meant to do this last week, but I personally had a whole bunch of stuff come up at the last minute that made it inconvenient for us to do it. So we are doing it here today. In fact, that's why the date says November 12th on here. I wanted to go ahead and just kind of start off by just recapping a little bit about what we've done. Then I think we're going to do hold a little memorial for Arjun here. But we actually shipped a ton of software releases since our last meeting in October. A lot of these were all related to basically security improvements and better TLS support inside Akka.net. I will be doing a blog post on all this stuff in the not too distant future here. Hopefully, I can get it done before the end of the month. That would be great. In fact, let me go and pull this over because we're going to talk a bit about another gigantic blog post we did since our last meetup. But I wanted to go ahead and touch on all of that as well. The next thing I would like to go ahead and actually do here is talk a little bit about, let me get his little slide up here. I want to talk a bit about someone who's been a core contributor to the Akka.net project for a very long time. That'd be my friend Arjen Smits. Arjun just recently passed away on Halloween. The long and the short of it is that Arjun had been struggling with brain tumors for quite some time, and eventually, basically just got to a place where there was not much more they could do about it. So he and I had been in regular communication over the last several months, and yeah, unfortunately, he passed away on October 31st. I wanted to go ahead and spend a couple minutes talking a bit about his actual contributions to the Akka.net project because he's been involved for 10 years, which is a long amount of time to spend working on anything, let alone a volunteer open source project. So as recently as this year, Arjun was working on trying to add like resiliency support. This is like back in like May of 2025, adding resiliency support to Akka.Persistence to make sure the journal and the snapshot store can recover from failures. But he had his hands in like a million different things on the Akka.net project. He was involved in basically a lot of the original development of Akka streams and fixing a lot of actual bugs, since he was probably one of the very first users of it. He did a lot of early work on the test kit, on making sure async await support worked. This is all like 2015-16 stuff. But then even more recently, he was working on issues like serialization fixes and improving the test kit's error handling and the clarity of its error messages. The other thing that he did was numerous documentation fixes, over 20 of them. So he was working all over big parts of the core Akka.net project, and he was regularly involved in our contributor meetings that we used to have back when Akka.net was a much younger and less mature project. And, I personally got to meet Arjun a few times when I would travel out to the Netherlands, which is where he was based. I would, travel out there for speaking at Techorama, or back in 2019, we had our Akka.net training tour, and Arjun was like fresh from brain surgery. Like I think he had just had it maybe 6 or 8 weeks prior to us coming up there. And he, after our training was done, he took a train up to Amsterdam, where we were doing our training location there, and came out with us and a bunch of the other attendees, us being Petabridge employees at the time, and had some beers with us. And that's the sort of guy Arjun was. He was always would quite literally go the distance to spend time with his friends, to engage with other Akka.net users and developers. And he was a real champion of the project. And I am going to miss him. And his contributions are one thing, but I'm really just going to miss his presence and his friendship. So I wanted to go ahead and give him a shout out and a proper send off here, because his impact is something that if you've been using the Akka.NET project for any amount of time, you've definitely benefited directly from his contributions. So his work's impacted, tens of thousands of software developers through the Akka.NET project, and I wanted to give him his due. And we're going to move on to talking a bit more about some of the work we were doing on the Akka.NET project. But at the end of the day, even though Petabridge does the lion's share of the humans work around Akka.NET these days, we still have hundreds of people who contribute to Akka.NET either by directly via code fixes or by letting us know about bugs or by filing issues or by fixing problems with the documentation. And that type of community spirit and involvement does not go a lot of it does not go unnoticed, but it often goes unrecognized. And that's why I wanted to recognize someone who'd been a very persistent and fantastic contributor to our project over all these years, and a great friend to me, Gregorius, and other members of our team personally. So thank you, Arjen. You'll be missed. And I think a lot of other software developers would love to have a fraction of the impact that you did. So thank you very much for your time and for your contributions. And I will sorely miss you. So, Gregorius, do you have anything you want to add?
No, not really. He's been around since pretty much the beginning when I joined the team. I think I joined at around 1.3-ish, and he's already around. So, yeah.
Yeah. So he's been around a long time. So I think he probably started using Akka.NET, I think probably even before Akka.NET 1.0 went out. So like the late betas before we took, because we took it out of beta status around like April or May of 2015. I think he was get involved before that. So yeah, big impact, big personality. Love Arjen, and gonna miss him very much. So on that somber note, I would love to talk a little bit about some of the recent Akka.NET work that we've been doing and some of the future work that's ongoing right now. So the story of, let's say, the month of October, I know we covered so Gregorius, correct me if I'm wrong, we actually discussed the big CVE itself in our October meeting, didn't we? Around mTLS not being implemented correctly.
Yeah, we
Yeah, we
did,
did.
I think. Yeah.
So a lot of the work that we've done since then has gone into making it easier to get a certificate validation, making it easier to get a certificate validation sort of scheme that matches what your organization needs. So if we take a look at let's see, this is, I think, the big issue here. Whoops, no, that's not it. It's this is the pull request I wanted to go and pull up here. This is all documented now. If I go to the getaka.net website and pull this up, this is all documented here under remoting. And if you go to network security, we basically have a fairly beefy document that explains all the different certificate validation options down here, along with basically like, let's see if I can find. Yeah, here we go. It kind of shows all the different methods for being able to do for being able to customize certificate validation. So we now support a setup function that you can pass into the basically it's a Akka.net actor system creation where you can pass in a custom validation function. So by default, we will always validate the chain. This is what's going to validate like the root signing authority, but you can also do things like certificate pinning, where if you want to make sure that every node in your cluster all has a certificate with the same thumbprint, you can do that. That is something that we now support. So if you want to basically like have a zero trust, running fully throughout your system where you don't trust the root signing authority, you actually prefer like, hey, I want to make sure everyone uses the exact same thumbprint, you can do that now. So this is something that we've incorporated into like the .NET SSL setup, which by the way is also exposed. If I go to Akka.Hosting, down here, we also expose that through the Akka.Hosting APIs now, where if I go to, I believe it is, let's see, where is Akka.Remote? Akka.Core plugins, Akka.Remote.Hosting. And I think, yeah, here we go down here. You can go ahead and do with promoting, do options.ssl custom validator. You can go ahead and invoke all those functions that way. And that will make sure that those settings get propagated. So for instance, we had the original customer that found this vulnerability. They basically have a certificate keyed for every single server that is running their Akka.NET application inside their environment. And they had something like whatever their company domain is, .machine in front of it. Well, we went ahead and gave them the ability to validate the subject of those certificates, where the machine name, could be arbitrary, but as long as that certificate is key to their domain, then the validation will work. And they've reported back to us that this all works in their live environment, which is great. And we have pretty extensive test coverage for all this. So all of the releases that we worked on were more or less all about trying to harden Akka.Remote security inside of here. We fixed a couple of other minor bugs around, like in this case, Akka streams. We hardened the ability for the endpoint writer to tolerate more serialization failures. We fixed some data bugs down here. But the long and the short of it is the lion's share of stuff we did on core Akka.NET, all security focused. We're going to have a dedicated YouTube video and a blog post that covers a lot more about security strategy with Akka.NET. And that's going to be relevant for Akka.NET 1.6 as well, for one really important reason, which is that the quick client, which is going to replace a lot of our TCP functionality, the quick requires at a protocol level that you use transport layer security, or at least a flavor of certificate-based security inside that system. So you are going to have to deal with this in your applications if you intend on upgrading to Akka.NET 1.6 one way or another. The underlying transport handling is going to change, but the way you configure security probably won't. So we're going to talk about the second part, how you configure security, in that video and blog post, and that'll have some persistent value into the future there. Now, a couple of other big things that we worked on over the course of the last several releases. We have put a lot of work, and Gregorius can attest to this, around Akka.Persistence health checks in particular. This is another thing that probably merits its own video, but I simply haven't had the bandwidth to go around to doing that just yet. So if I go and pull up, for instance, Gregorius, you were just working on Akka.Persistence Azure. I think was the one you fixed earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all right, let me go and grab that. All right, Akka.Persistence Azure. So we just did a new release here. The big thing that we added, so we talked about this in some previous releases, but we added support for traditional journal and snapshot store-based health checks. They're essentially readiness checks. They can detect whether or not the circuit breakers open or closed. One of the things that people requested inside our Discord is they wanted the ability to get liveness checks on the database to see if they were misconfigured specifically. So if someone, fat fingered a connection string, or if someone used, an SAS token that expired in the, using like Azure or something, we wanted to be able to make sure that we could catch that at startup and fail the deployments or force the pods to restart. So we've added to all of our Akka.Persistence implementations that we maintain this with connectivity check plugin, call down here. This is a new liveness check that will actually make sure we can successfully round trip to the database or not. It'll do this once every 10 seconds roughly, so it's not very strenuous, but you can configure that. You can also configure how severe this error is, and you can also go ahead and configure, let's say, the frequency with which it checks here. So we're mostly just making sure we can open a connection, query a table, and then leave is more or less what we're doing here. So we have this available on Akka.Persistence Azure. And if I take a look at the list, Akka.Persistence Azure has it. We also have it for Akka.Persistence SQL, MongoDB, and Redis. All of those support that. Next, if we scroll down a little bit, we have a new version of Akka.Management that's been released. Mostly these are just diagnostic fixes that are designed to make it a little bit easier to understand if you have some problems during cluster bootstrapping. So that's all built into that. We shipped a couple of other important updates. Oh man, the Pettibridge.Command update is actually a pretty big one, and we have vastly undersold that. If I go to our documentation and I go to our commands, this is all Gregorius's brainchild right here. We have a new command called actor alive that we've introduced. This will basically give you a printout of all the actors grouped by their type that are currently living inside your system. We did this because we had a well, actually, Gregorius, if you want to go ahead and explain the motivation for this real quick, I think that'd be best.
Well, actually, I kind of forgot.
Well, the long and the short of it was, if I go to like, let's take a look at SDK Bin's Frobos dashboard real quick. So we just did a deploy right before this, actually like 10 minutes before we started this call, we did a live production deployment on SDK Bin. In fact, well, not, we go back an hour. Yeah, you can see it right here. One of the things that we wanted to do was we basically filtered out, in fact, let me go and maybe, this should be all right. If I go back to the last 30 minutes, this chart will look a little cleaner. There we go. We wanted a second method of being able to verify the live actor counts on this dashboard, because we had a customer that was reporting that the total number of like shard or, in this case, I don't know, SDK bin mailing actors was lower than what they were expecting. So we wanted to go and produce a system where the user could do a live query and basically say, okay, does the data I'm seeing in OpenTelemetry match the data that Pettibridge.Command is producing? So essentially, it's a second method of verification. And if you don't have Phobos, this will basically give you the ability to do a query on who is alive in your actor system right now. And we moved that into this palette because we already had the existing actor hierarchy command, which would do a dump of what your live actor hierarchy looks like. Well, instead of doing a dump of your live actor hierarchy, this kind of provides you with a summary table of how many actors are alive at any given time. That's what this does. So that's available in, if I take a look at the release notes, that's why this is missing. I think it's missing from the agenda here. Actor alive got added in Pettibridge.Command 1.5. So we probably need to do a blog post and a more public announcement about that too. But we just shipped that, let's say a little bit over a week ago. So that's a new piece of functionality that I think users will find very helpful. That ships in the default command palette that Pettibridge.Command comes with out of the box. So as long as you upgrade to 1.5, that should be there automatically. You don't need to install anything else. Let's take a look at the rest of these release notes here. Updated all of our plugins to support the new health check stuff. That's all good. Let's go ahead and shift gears real quick to talking about some upcoming Akka.net plans that we're working on. We have a number of big things in the mix. So one thing I'll go ahead and talk a bit about. Let's see if I have, here we go. And let me double check. I don't know if I've opened a GitHub issue for this yet. I guess I haven't. Yeah, I guess I haven't opened it yet. All right. Two things that we're going to add. For Akka.net 1.5, and therefore this will also be in 1.6, we're looking at adding default semantic logging support to the built-in Akka.net loggers. This is one of those things where we've been a little behind the curve here for a while, and a lot of the reasons why we kind of fell behind. This was originally on the roadmap for Akka.net 1.5, but we dropped it because we had too many other things going on. Well, as a result of basically just it's a lot easier for us now to go ahead and get like compatibility with platforms like Microsoft.extensions.logging and Serialog these days due to some of the enhancements we made in Akka.net 1.5. Namely, we made the log formatter configurable. That's one reason why it's easier for us to go and do this. We laid some of the groundwork for it. But B, there's a bunch of functionality that's kind of hard to use in Akka.net without support for semantic logging. One example of this is actually it's a little bit difficult for people to use semantic logging with something like Serialog as their logger implementation, but you also want to use the event filter during testing. In fact, it was one of our support customers brought this up to us, and we're like, yeah, we shouldn't force people to stop using semantic logging because they also want to use our testing. It shouldn't have to be a dichotomy. So we're going to make sure this gets supported. We're not planning on taking any additional dependencies for this, but this should get built in soon. Another issue that I guess I'll have to open after this call that I'm planning on implementing is changing our Akka.Persistence callbacks. Let me show you an example from SDK bin real quick. This is our new undeployed code in SDK bin that I was working on a couple of weeks ago. And let's take a look, for instance, at our invoicing actor right here. Now I'm going to scroll down and let me take a look at, is it this actor or the subscription actor that does this? Let me take a look here. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So that's not it. Let me see if we do persist all in here. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, look at this garbage. This is boilerplate code I've had to write a version of in like 5 different actors, where I keep track of the number of events that we're going to persist. And I have to figure out, is this the last event in this array that I persisted? Because if it is the last event, I want to force ourselves to sync our read model. There's 2 different API design problems here with Akka.Persistence. The first API design problem is that I don't know when I'm at the end of the line when it comes to persistence. There might be things in these callbacks I only want to do in the final one. So we should add some ability to provide a hint as to whether or not you are in the first or last or nth position inside of here. So that's something that we want to support via the persistence callback design here, is let you know, okay, you're the final callback in this array of everything that's been persisted. The other thing is that I'm having to do the self.tell sync read model rather than just calling. In fact, let me see where we handle this in here. If I go and take a look at sync read model. Yeah, I basically do this await sync invoice read model. This is me projecting our invoice from Akka.Persistence to Entity Framework Core. And we're doing that because the way this particular application works is that the invoice is going to be a materialized view that sits in a couple of database rows. And that's going to be what we actually render on screen. We're not going to query the live actor for being able to represent the invoice. We are going to just query a table. That's the way we're kind of building the UI layer of this application. Well, another thing that Akka.Persistence won't let me do is await inside a callback right now, which I find to be very annoying and actually creates some potential error handling and consistency problems for me. So we're going to change the signature to allow awaiting inside of there as well, which should, in my opinion, greatly simplify some of the code like mine that you've just seen. That's one set of future plans that we're working on, is improving. This is all stuff that'll go into a new version of Akka.NET 1.5. A thing I've been working on for Akka.NET 1.6, I don't have a good prototype to show yet because I'm still in the pen and paper stage, but I have begun some prototype work on Akka.NET serialization. I probably need to put together a real spec for this. But the work I've been looking at is Gregorius had a prototype of doing code gen serialization that he did like a couple years ago. We're still going to do that by that sort of code gen approach, but I'm restructuring the way the serialization APIs work, which is rather than doing a round trip from an object to an array of bytes or span of bytes, which is what the new API proposals initially looked like, I'm thinking about doing more of a stream like layout and buffering strategy instead, where rather than doing round trips of snapshots with objects, we can kind of compose the writes in a more like, I guess I would call it like a tree looking fashion. The reason, tree's not really the right word. It's more of like a nested if statements is kind of how I would approach it. The reason why I'm looking at doing it that way is it solves a hierarchical messaging problem that Akka.NET has, which is namely, people want to be able to wrap messages in envelopes for doing things like sending control messages or using DData or whatever. And doing that with this sort of object-based approach means multiple round trips to the serializer, which really hurts our throughput with technologies like distributed data, for instance. Using a stream writer strategy allows us to lay those things out in a composed linear fashion, which should be significantly faster. Anyway, I do not have code to show you. I'm simply doing on-paper design and prototyping right now, but I'm pretty sure things are going to go that way. The other reason why I like that sort of stream buffer approach is it is inherently much more backwards compatible than what we have currently. And then finally, the last thing I would like to touch on is I would like to touch on doing Akka.Reminders, which is a little prototype I put out on GitHub a week ago. Let me go ahead and grab that. I guess I already had it up here. All right. This Akka.Reminders system is something that would be built probably as a add-on to Akka.Cluster.Sharding is what we would do. And the idea behind this is to basically act as a replacement for the Quartz integration. And there's one really big difference between this and the Quartz integration. Well, two big differences. One is we absolutely do not care about cron expressions. We do not need to do that. That's not something that we consider to be important in this design. The other big issue is that this is built around sharding and sharding only. I absolutely do not care about scheduling messages to local actors in this design. Could not care less. Not this actor's problem. Will never be its problem. So the design around this is to be something that can wake a sharded actor up on a deadline to basically have it perform some sort of task. And this is what this truly is distributed scheduling. The idea behind it is that rather than have a central actor that has to keep track of all the little things that need to be done at any given time, instead you have a bunch of sharded entity actors that represent workflows or work to be done, who will schedule a reminder using their entity key and their shard region type to the scheduler at any given time. And that scheduler will wake that actor up when it is time to do the task, and the actor will do the appropriate thing once that's done. So I won't waste your time kind of showing you like how the backend is implemented. You can take a look at that code if you want. But for instance, we have a couple of different storage providers. We have in-memory storage, and then we also have a SQL Server and Postgres storage currently. I am not able to use Akka.Persistence for storing the schedule, unfortunately. This is designed to be a large-scale scheduling system with potentially millions of scheduled operations pending at any given time. If we were going to use Akka.Persistence to organize that, that would require storing the entire schedule in memory, which I think would be a bad design. So from a trade-offs perspective, and plus this is like a little personal package for now. It's just a proposed API. I basically decided to go ahead and just like, we're going to have our own database schema that is optimized for being able to support scheduling well, where scheduled reminders are sorted in the order, in their invocation or in their like scheduled invocation order. So like when the tasks are due, that's how they're organized, not by when they were added to the schedule, which is another reason why I didn't use Akka.Persistence. So to give you an example of how this works, you would call context.system reminder client. This would go ahead and basically give you access to the reminders client system. You would call extension.create client down here, and you pass in the name of your shard region and your entity ID. And from this point onward, you can go ahead and call schedule single reminder async, and you pass in a reminder key. You specify a deadline when this is due. So you don't specify a time span, you specify a date. When do you want this added in the future? So it's based off of essentially a date time. And then you specify the message you want to have sent to yourself. This message will be sent to you through the shard region. It is going to wake you back up, this particular message here. So that's what the reminder system is going to do. It's going to use this information to figure out which shard region do you belong to and what's your entity ID, and it will wake you up using this message. And once you receive this message down here, this, let's say, do something, you'll go ahead and do your processing. We also support recurring reminders down here where you have the initial due date, what's the first time this is due, and then a period that's going to get invoked from that point onward. If you want to take a look at how I'm using this in SDK bin, let me take a look at, let's see, where do I have the reminder client? have it here. This is my invoicing actor. I use the reminder client. I'm primarily canceling reminders on here, but I'll do something like schedule a reminder. Let me take a look at this code. This is a little complicated because the domain we're handling is complicated. Yeah, here we go. The invoicing actor will create a payment intent when it's time to run your payment. Today, that payment might be a credit card, but we're also working on support for things like purchase orders and wire transfers. And so we open a payment intent, and if the payment intent fails for whatever reason, and we have a whole different actor that manages that, we will basically decide that the invoice is unpaid. At this point in time, we'll say, okay, this is a hardening, which means that we've exceeded our payment retry attempts. We're going to mark the invoice as unpaid, and this means that a angry looking message is going to go out to the end user once this happens. And this is going to begin the calculation of this is going to begin what we call a grace period, where essentially that the service is still going to be active even though the invoice is unpaid, and the customer has that window of time to change their payment method and allow us to restart the payment process over again. And at the end of that grace period, if the invoice is still unpaid, their service will be discontinued. That's what this little state machine is all about. Well, basically, what I'm using the reminder client to do here is I'm scheduling a reminder. If there hasn't been any update to the invoicing activity within this period of time, we are going to terminate service. And it'll be up to us to go ahead and basically send suspend subscription command once this happens. So that's what we're doing here. We are going to basically let the subscription actor know that at the end of this grace period, right now, I think we're hard coding it as like a week. This code is not, again, this isn't in production yet. It's not fully baked. But we're basically going to go ahead and give them this amount of time. This grace period is actually configurable, so I need to set that up. But the gist of it is that this is how we're using the reminder. This actor will be dead long before this reminder ever gets fired. The goal of the reminder system is to wake the actor back up. That's the big difference. Akka.Persistence.Reminders, a library that Bartosz wrote a number of years ago, and I think Vigif maintains it. And then there's the Quartz integration. Those are all built around messaging actors that already exist. What this system is about is waking actors up that need to exist in order to process the reminder. So that's a big departure. They look similar, but they have some very, very important subtleties that make them behave totally differently. So that's what the reminder system is really all about, is trying to give you the ability to be reentrant, to have a scheduler that will wake you up when it is time to do your task. So that's what the reminder system is for. If you want to check it out, you can go to, I think we included a link to this in the description, but you can go to my personal GitHub, Aaron on the web /Akka.Reminders. And the NuGet package that's available for it is Aaron.Akka.Reminders on NuGet. And then we have a second package for the SQL-based storage. We can probably also add storage for other platforms too, like Redis and Mongo, probably. I'm just not going to do it until there's demand for it. But this is all available. I'm already using this in like our billing system for SDK bin. So we're definitely not going to like completely abandon this, but I very much reserve the right to change it pretty significantly for the time being until I'm confident it'll suit SDK bin's needs, at which point we'll probably work on trying to integrate this into the core Akka.net project as well. Any questions or comments from chat on this? I don't see any. Gregorius, do you have any feedback for me on the reminder system, since you haven't seen any of that new SDK bin code either? That's all been in my gigantic work in progress pull request.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen the code yet, but it looks, it looks interesting.
I've got some work to do. I found like stuff I'm not super happy with on the error handling side of things with reminders, so I need to do a little bit of cleanup there. The configuration is pretty simple. The SQL schema is not that complicated either. It's basically just I think it's literally just one table is all that we need for this. We use the same sort of serialization scheme that Akka.Persistence uses, so there's no real difference there. and it's all fairly it's meant to be fairly low footprint, all this stuff. So one of the other things that I kind of like about this design, by the way, I think it'll be I'm kind of I mentioned on Twitter when I first tweeted about this library, I could see the beginnings of a hang fire replacement here potentially as like an abstraction on top of Akka.Cluster.Sharding and Akka.Reminders. You totally could. You could build a hang fire replacement with like a UI dashboard and everything too. But that's kind of more of just a thing you could do, not a thing I'm committing to doing, but just wanted to put that out there. Well, all right. I think that will do it for our November community stand-up. We are definitely going to have some more big releases before December, but I'm thinking, Gregorius, I'm thinking it might be a good idea to bring back the eggnog and do another bugathon next year for our December community stand-up. I will have a newborn daughter, I think, by the time that stand-up arrives, so I will definitely be ready for a drink after all the hospital visit and everything else by then. So maybe I'll do some eggnog with rum and and do that for our next community stand-up. Yeah. And I promise, I think it was Andy Furnival who brought this up. We will have some music other than Dance with the Sugar Plum Fairy this time. I promise. We'll work something out. But otherwise, thank you very much for your support, everybody. Appreciate everyone showing up and supporting the project. I will catch you, and Gregorius and I will catch you next month at our Christmas debugathon. I think that sounds like a good tradition that we should maintain for a second year in a row. All right. Catch you next time, and thank you very much.